Here's an example of a plant that I was completely underwatering because I had no idea how to water it. And to give you context, so this is my other obovata. I got those two plants at the same time, and the other plant was bigger than this one. And this obovata was one leaf when I got it, and it grew all of this. I chopped it, propped it in here, it grew again, I chopped it again, put in this other vine in here because I was trying to initiate the splash, and this is how long it's become. So trust me when I tell you. We're going to talk about some of the things that you can do to help jumpstart your Hoya. I'm no Hoya professional. I have been growing them for around a year or so. These are the things that have helped me with my Hoya, and maybe they could help you too. I just thought I'd share them. If you're new here, hi, my name is Stephanie. I like growing houseplants and I like doing it on a budget. Hoya have the reputation of being slow growers, and I've made it clear in my last Hoya video, my fast growing Hoya video, that I don't think that's entirely true. I have a question for you. Have you recently repotted your Hoya? Maybe in the past 4 weeks or so? If the answer is yes, it's normal for your Hoya to slow down in growth. In my experience with my Hoya, not all of them, but a lot of them will stop growing when they feel a shift in their root system. So if they notice that before they used to be snug and now they're no longer snug, they're going to stop growing and pushing new leaves and focus on getting that root system established in its new substrate, because I've noticed they like to feel their surroundings. They're a type of plant that I think enjoys being root bound more than some of your other plants. So if you have first recently repotted your Hoya, yes, it is going to take a while before it gets back to normal and before it pushes its energy back into growing new leaves. A Hoya that caused me to really learn this lesson is my Hoya Joy Splash. I recently featured it in my Hoya favorites video. That one is one that was growing beautifully for me. Not extremely fast, but steadily growing. When it finally got established and felt the parameters of the medium of the pot that it was in, it started pushing out new growth. And then me noticing roots coming out of the bottom, I started to panic a little and think, okay, well, I don't want it to be root bound in here. It was starting to circle around the bottom. And I thought, okay, let me repot it. And I literally just took it out of one and put it into the other just the way it was. And it stopped growing completely for a very long time. And not only did it do that, it dropped the new leaves that were coming out. The moral of the story is, don't do it when they're pushing out new leaves, number one. And secondly, it's going to take them a very long time to recover. I want to say it took about 3 months before new leaves started coming out, maybe even more than that, of my Hoya Joy Splash. So if you have itchy hands and repot often like I have, and I've learned the hard way, stop. Just Hoya like to feel root bound. So leave them and allow them to be comfortably rooted. And when you notice that maybe they're terribly root bound, they're really not growing, they're dropping new leaves, because it is like, you will know when they're really root bound, that's when you will go ahead and repot them. So number one, if you repotted it recently, it's likely that it's going to slow down its growth. Number two, let's say that's not the case for you. You haven't repotted your Hoya recently. It is just literally sitting there and is not doing anything. What could be the reason, or what could you do, which is what my video is about. When I first started collecting Hoya, the advice that was popular at the time was Hoya are easily overwatered. They've got thick succulent leaves. They can store water in their leaves. They're very drought tolerant, so you don't need to water them as often. And so I pulled all the way back and would let my Hoya dry out completely before watering them, because that was the advice given at the time. I learned the hard way, and the hard way being the long way. Happily, I didn't lose plants because of this, but it took me a while to realize that when I watered the plant, I would see lots and lots of growth. And then when I let it dry out, the growth would stop completely. And then I water it again and I'd see lots and lots of growth. And then when I let it dry out, it will stop completely. I have my Hoya in very high light conditions. We'll talk about light in a little while. I was letting them dry out way too much. So I decided to I decided to start putting my Hoya into self-watering pots. This is why you'll see a lot of my houseplants in self-watering pots. Self-watering pots allow the Hoya to take whatever it wants whenever it needs it, and it reduces the risk of overwatering. I wouldn't use soil in self-watering pots. Definitely, I would not. I would use mostly a chunky aeroid mix, like something that has lots of bark and other very chunky elements. It still needs to be water retentive in some way. It still needs to have an agent in there that's going to retain moisture, because Hoya are very thirsty plants. They're thirsty, and so if you are letting them stay too dry, they're going to stop growing while they're dry. Do not wait for your Hoya to be wrinkled and dehydrated before watering it. That really slows down your plant. It risks rot, and I know it does get it to bloom, and a lot of people like to do that because it gets it to bloom. I mean, if you're into Hoya for blooms, that's fantastic. But if you're into Hoya for growth like I am, you're going to want to keep that Hoya hydrated. So terracotta pots might not be your best bet because they dry out the plant really quickly. Okay, so here's an example of a plant that I was completely underwatering because I had no idea how to water it. And this is a con of self-watering pots, because you never get a chance to figure out the plant because you are letting the pot do all of the work for you. So this is a Hoya obovata, and I've had it for almost a year. So I think spring or late spring, maybe June would be a year that I've had it. And as you can see, it hasn't done very much. If anything, I lost more leaves than I grew on this thing. I believe in my care, I've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves in my care. And the reason for that, especially when you compare it to my other obovata, which I will show you in a minute, is because it's not in a self-watering pot. And because it's not, I couldn't figure out how to water it. And so I severely underwatered it. So I thought this was a dud actually, or I thought it had flat mites. I treated it so much for pests and it still wouldn't grow until I started watering it some more. And so what I would say the past maybe 3 months or so, maybe just about 3-4 months, especially when my other obovata started doing really well, I'm like, I'm just gonna water this freely. You know what, if I lose it, that's okay. And so I have leca at the bottom and a chunky mix at the top, and so it creates a bit of a reservoir, and I just let the water go into the cover pot here. So it's like almost like a self-watering setup. But definitely these 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves are definitely recent. And so a perfect example to me of a plant that was so underwatered, and it's not until I just started giving it more water, and that's when I started seeing some growth. And to give you context, so this is my other obovata that's actually in a self-watering pot. And I got those 2 plants at the same time, and the other plant was bigger than this one. And this obovata was 1 leaf when I got it. If you follow me, you already have seen my obovata. It was 1 leaf, and it grew all of this. I chopped it, propped it in here. It grew again. I chopped it again, put in this other vine in here because I was trying to initiate the splash. And this is how long it's become. So trust me when I tell you, self-watering pots are a game changer. And this is the pot that it's in. Self-watering pots are a game changer when it comes to Hoya, because it really takes a guessing game. If you are confident and if you want to try and test it out and figure it out, and so you can be on a little bit of a routine with your plant, then go for it. But if you're like me with a bunch of plants, you just want the plant to perform as best as possible without relying on you for water. Since Hoya are so thirsty, I would say self-watering pots are the way to go. Another thing I want to mention under the topic of watering is that if you have your Hoya in self-watering pots, how do I say this? Some Hoya will wick up water slowly than your other Hoya. So I have Hoya that are very thirsty, that are very quick. Check out my fast growing Hoya video, because those Hoya dry out their reservoirs very quickly. They will use up every single drop of water that's in that reservoir. Other Hoya that are not as fast growing will take a while. They may may not even ever use up the entire reservoir. So something that has helped me is replacing the water in the reservoir. So in my head, oh, it's self-watering, I could just leave it, and then when this thing dries out completely, that's when I'll add more water. But no, because what happens is eventually that water, basically it gets stale, it gets gross, it loses the nutrients, lose strength, it probably loses oxygen. These are guesses. I have not gone with a microscope and taken a look at the water or tested it, but I have noticed my plants like the water a lot less when it's a week and a half to 2 weeks old. When I either top it up with fresh water that has oxygen or has fresh nutrients and fertilizer in it, or when I toss the water out completely and replace it with fresh water, I notice an improvement in the growth of my plant. So the point is, if you're using self-watering pots, don't wait for that reservoir to completely dry out. Give it a nice refresh, either tossing it out completely or topping it up every week and a half or so, just to make sure that the plant is getting fresh water. Also, when the wick gets a bit gross, go in, clean out that wick, give the plant a little bit of a spruce up. That's really going to help with the growth of your plant. This is connected to watering. It's fertilize, feed your Hoya. I feed my Hoya with every single watering. I use 2 types of fertilizer at 2 different times. So whichever one is closest to my hand. Recently, the one that I've been using the most is just your standard Miracle Grow fertilizer, the blue one that's sort of not pellets, but it's not powder, it's granules, I guess we could call it, but it's a fertilizer by Miracle Grow. You could find it in Home Depot, very easy to find. It's inexpensive if you ask me. It's probably one of the cheapest fertilizers you would find out there. And that's what I'm currently using in my Hoya. I was also using another fertilizer, but I changed my watering system and it was a bit hard to use that fertilizer with my watering system. It was just not convenient for me to use it. And so, yeah, I'm going to get back into using that one soon. But the Miracle Grow one actually works very well with my Hoya. Fertilizing your Hoya is super important. A lot of them have these thick succulent leaves, and also blooming, pushing out peduncles and blooms take a lot of energy from the plant. So I think feeding them well will really help to push and encourage it to push out new growth. When I started using a big 5-gallon bottle to water my plants, I wasn't exactly sure how much fertilizer to put into that. And so I was a little bit worried. I mean, I tried doing the calculation, tried following the recommendation, but I was a bit nervous of putting too much fertilizer. So I put in, with caution, a little bit less than what would have been recommended. And so I noticed that my Hoya slowed down in growth. And I thought it was maybe all in my head. I thought, I don't know, maybe there's some other reason why they're not growing. Maybe it's because we're going into winter. That could have been a reason too. But I recently, since I came back, I checked the measurements and I started putting more, or the amount that it was recommended. It just feels like a lot. Like the amount that's recommended feels like a lot, but you know what? I followed it and I put it in and have noticed a movement. I've noticed an improvement in how much they're growing. I've noticed a difference. So yeah, try fertilizing regularly to the strength that is recommended. Again, use your own judgment. You know your plants. Use it and then watch it. Look to see if the plant, has fertilizer burn or is reacting negatively to it. Always do these things with caution and supervise your plant when you've done anything new or introducing anything like that to it. Water, light, they go hand in hand. You need a right amount of both in order for your plant to be happy. If you're watching this video, there's a likelihood that you are not satisfied with the rate that your Hoya is growing. So if that is you, bump up that light. Put the plant closer to a window, closer under the grow light. I have noticed that my Hoya perform the best when they have very high amounts of light. There are just a few Hoya in my collection that do not perform best in high amounts of light. When I say high amounts of light, I mean directly under the grow light or directly into the window. A lot of my Hoya, when summer comes, I'm gonna stick them directly into sunlight. My Hoya are used to having high light under grow lights in my collection, so I feel comfortable sticking them into direct light, but I will advise you to slowly acclimate your plants into direct sunlight if that's something that you want to do, meaning start with having them behind a curtain or just really close to it, just having, or maybe having them there for shorter hours and then pulling them back. You want to make it a very slow and gradual process before just shoving them in there for 10 hours in the direct sun. It's totally something that I would do, and I would, if there's a leaf that's burnt, clip it off, let's move on. Not if you're a little bit more gentle, that's fine too. The point is you need to bump up that light, because I noticed that Hoya perform their best, especially variegated and splashy Hoya, which I've learned is a type of variegation, splash that is. They really need those high light conditions in order to give you that splash and variegation and fast growth that we are all looking for. That's why we got it. And word on the street is that Hoya need heat in order to bloom. I have not tested out this theory completely yet. And what do you know? Heat usually is heavily associated with high amounts of light, or like hot grow lights or direct sun. So you may want to bump up the light if you're looking for faster growth, blooms, and variegation. A plant that I learned that with is the Hoya globulosa. So the Hoya globulosa is one of those very dark, beautifully dark leafed Hoya. Oh, the thing is gorgeous. It has these very dark pubescent leaves with a little bit of a raised veining. I love that Hoya. And so in my mind, I thought, okay, if I want that Hoya to maintain its dark, deep looking leaves, I want to keep it a little bit further back from the grow light in order for it to stay a little bit dark. And what happened is the plant wasn't growing. And I was like, what's happening? So I did two things that I mentioned. I started refreshing the water in the reservoir. Instead of leaving it, I washed out the pot. I would refresh it and do that regularly, topping it up. And that's when it started growing as well. Bumping it a little bit closer to the light, and bada bing, bada boom, we have a happy Hoya that's pushing out some amazing looking leaves. It is still not fast. It's, again, not all Hoya are fast. Even if you do all of these things, it doesn't mean it's going to grow as fast as a Hoya DS70, but it is going to not be painfully slow. The next tip I have for you is one that I used to go to a lot more in the past. Like I used to jump to that before I changed water and lighting. But there's still a place for that. There's still a place for this technique. And that is to chop the plant. Sometimes when my plants stop growing, especially Hoya, sometimes a Hoya would start pushing out a vine and then it just dries out and then it just becomes a dud. Like it just dies there and doesn't reactivate that area. So a great way to prompt and stimulate growth in your plant is to cut it above a node. So for example, here's a plant. I just happen to have this plant next to me because I just filmed my fastest growing Hoya video. But let's say this is the vine that's not growing for you. Just cut, be right above a group of leaves. So right above here, just chop that. And then this new area here will become your new growth spot. So whatever new growth that's gonna come out could come from there or any of the nodes before that. It just gives the plant a jump start, it reactivates it, and it stimulates it. Sometimes it even makes them think, whoa, what's happening? And so it actually prompts it to push out brand new growth points because it's trying to counteract the threat of being chopped off. So it's going to stimulate it and want it to be reactivated. It's going to want to grow. It's going to want to not be, done away with. And so it's going to push out new growth in multiple places a lot of times in order to ensure the continuity of the plant. So try that. A plant that this worked for me with is my Hoya Wimanier Cloudy Sky. So Jenna had this plant, Jenna from Jenna's Plants. She gifted it to me, and I definitely saw what she meant. I said, I'll take it. I wanted to give it a try and give my go. And the thing would not grow. it just would not grow. And so that's what I did. I chopped it up into tiny pieces. I put some in water, I put some in a substrate, I put some in different rooting mediums, and then they rooted. It took forever, but they rooted, and then I potted them all up together. And now I have a plant that's actually pushing out new leaves. It's actually doing something. Does it still grow very slowly? Yes, it does, but it's growing way faster than it did before. Its growth style is that it's a slow plant. It operates on island time, you know, at its own time, you know, it just does its own thing. But you know what? It's growing. It's growing. I feel like that is way more satisfying. It does it slowly, but it's doing it. You can see the new growth is coming out, the leaves are growing. It takes a long time for them to get established, for them to harden off, and the next leaves are coming and they take a little while, but the point is something is happening. We have movement. We're not just a bare vine, which is very frustrating. Or another reason that your Hoya possibly is not growing is because it may have maybe flat mites or some form of a pest issue, something that's eating out the new growth or really stunting the growth of the plant. So I would recommend treating your plant for pests. A lot of people have used neem oil. A lot of people use neem oil. I personally use horticultural oil to treat my plants for pests, and I use it as a preventative treatment, and I use it as like a full-on heavy treatment as well. And you know, try that. Do this once a week. Give it a little bit of a spray, especially on the areas where that new growth is supposed to come out of, because then if there's anything munching away at those baby leaves that are trying to develop, treatment of your spray or your pesticide or your method, whatever you're using, as long as it's effective, it will help to sort of neutralize that threat there and help encourage that new growth to come out. Editing Stephanie here, checking the plant for root rot. So sometimes almost any plant, but Hoya included, can stop growing if there's root trouble. So you may want to check the roots to see if there's any damage. And last but not least, a reason why your plant might not be growing is the same reason why my Hoya Rebecca doesn't grow well. And that is because, are you ready? Coming close. It's a dud. It's a dud. It could just have poor genetics, be an unhealthy plant, an unhealthy cutting, maybe a plant that experienced shock or underwent something before you got it, and will always experience some growth troubles because it's just sort of a damaged plant. You know, it's sick. It's a sick plant. And so sometimes, no matter how hard we try with these plants, no matter all the best care and treatment we give them, sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes we just need to start all over and just get a brand new healthy plant. These are the tips, the things that I have done to help me overcome stunted Hoya that just refused to grow. This has what helped me to get to that next level and see some form of movement, to see some signs of life in the plant. Do I still have some Hoya that grow extremely slowly? Yes, I do. A lot of these things have helped me to sort of help the plant to slowly but surely push out little signs of life that help me to know that I just need to be a little bit more patient, and I just need to keep at the techniques that I'm doing. Keep refreshing the water, keep treating for pests, keep it under highlight conditions, refrain from repotting it. That way the plant can get established and start pushing out new growth. I hope this was helpful to you. If it did, give me a thumbs up to let me know that you enjoyed and found this video helpful and you found value in it. Thanks again for watching. My name is Stephanie, and I'll see you next time. Bye.